TV. I'm delighted to welcome Gurman Hundal to the office today. Welcome, Gurman.
Thank you for having me.
So Gurman is the co-founder of Media IQ. Tell us about Media IQ.
So Media IQ is a business that started just over 2 years ago now, and we really started this business to innovate in the field of trading and more so make trading as accessible as possible to our clients. So we currently trade for 250 advertisers across 5 markets. So we've got offices in Bangalore, Hamburg, London, Manchester and New York.
And you've done this in 2 years, and I guess in a very performance-driven environment, unless you deliver numbers, you're just not going to be successful. So you've developed this kind of reputation for being trading experts. So what's the secret to that?
For us, the point of differentiation behind Media IQ is a combination of our strategy, our technology and our people. And I think the clear focus we've had on trading and to innovate in the field of trading has, I think, allowed us to grow as quickly as we have.
Okay, and so I'm going to get right into the whiteboard. You've agreed to come in today to visualise and map out just one of the kind of trading tactics that you execute on a daily basis. And it's really around this planning and buying process and how you're making it kind of accessible to your clients, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to talk us through it?
So a big part of our strategy is flexibility. So when you're trading a client's budget, you should have the freedom to incorporate all forms of targeting so that you can focus on the areas that are performing best, right? And not just sort of fix yourself down one approach. But I actually want to give some insight onto just one targeting strategy that we deploy for clients. So when you think about trading, it's quite simple. It's planning and buying. So planning is doing a lot of analysis to understand what to target, when to target, and why to target any particular user or in any particular environment. And then you need to use technology to effectively buy that impression efficiently. And we use bid algorithms to do that. So I'll probably just jump in and explain this.
Draw that bit out.
Okay, so like I said, we'll have multiple forms of targeting on a campaign, but one thing that we do is we build customized lookalike segments for clients to effectively prospect new customers. And I just want to give you a bit of insight into how that works. So let's just take, you've got a segment of users, which is the advertisers' first party data. And let's just say this is their converted users. Now, within our analysis platform AIQ, we collect up to 240 variables on every impression and every user, right? And some of these variables might be user interests.
So behavioural,
yeah,
third-party behavioural companies. Yeah?
Exactly. Domain analysis, so what types of sites do they visit? You're going to have then some of the standard stuff like geo, where did they log in from, what was the time of day, what was the browser, what was the operating system, etc., etc. And that goes up to 240 different points of data of each impression in each user. So what we're trying to do is when we already have knowledge of a client's particular user base, we try and look at what kind of characteristics, what kind of other things do they do online. So they'll also be interested in multiple other things and be within multiple segments. And they'll also be visiting several different types of sites and logging in from different locations at different times of day, through different browsers, through different areas. And we basically map out their behavior, and then we apply a fairly complex statistical model, which effectively, currently we have over 125 models now that we use, to basically find other users that are not in that segment that have similar characteristics. So it could be Paul is not been on this advertiser's site, but he also is in this segment, visiting this domain, logs in at the same time of day, is from this geo. We'll be like, okay, if he's got these characteristics, he qualifies to go in this customized lookalike segment here.
And this process is being executed by some companies, which tends to be focused really around the behavioural point, whereas I guess these other variables give you a bit more dimensionality to that user.
Yeah, because user interests is just one aspect, right? So a statistical model is always going to work better the more data points it can reference. And for us, if we've got 240 data points, what it doesn't make sense just to look at only one and model off that.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to get more accuracy, which is going to lead to better clients' performance.
Okay, and then you mentioned this kind of like closed loop process, and I guess that maybe is that one of the differences of where you really see this impact from a trading perspective, which is don't just build some model, have some cookies there, and then pass it off to someone to do. That the real performance is when it's actually baked into the way you're actually decisioning every single impression.
Yeah, this is planning. We haven't actually bought anything yet, right? So it's only half the equation, right? So from our perspective, it's like, okay, so we're gonna, from day one, we're gonna have this is just one targeting strategy that we'll deploy, but we're gonna have a fairly good idea of who to go out and target, right? So there, we set the campaign up, it's ready to go, right? Then it's all about buying that user and that impression in an efficient manner. And we use bid algorithms to do that. But we've developed with our engineering team, we've developed the ability to build customized bid algorithms by client. And I just want to talk about how that works. Right? So if you look at, this is one sort of, a part of, the reason behind Media IQ is that we want to make things as accessible as possible. And I think people kind of sometimes think this algorithm is this just like piece of magic that, a NASA scientist has created or anything like that. Well, actually, a bid algorithm is fairly simple. A bid algorithm is this, and it's pretty much this in most buying platforms. It's the actual bid will equal the goal. So if you've got a performance goal that you've set, like a CPA goal or a CPC goal, multiplied by the historical conversion rate. Conversion rate, yeah. Times 1,000 to change it to a CPM effector. And then there's a few other variables we add in, like we call frequency modifier, which is an algorithm that basically will decrease or increase the bid based on the number of exposures a user has had on that ad and the likelihood of that exposure leading to conversion. So, for example, historical data might suggest that every time a user sees the ad twice, they're 30% more likely to convert. Here, there will be a 30% increase in bid. But if a user's seen the ad 15 times, they're 70% less likely to convert. So you'd have a times 0.03 here.
And in this instance, where does some of this insight apply into this kind of?
I'll get to that.
Okay, sorry.
And then you've got a safety margin, because one thing that you really understand about bid algorithms is they only work if there's a lot of historical conversion data, and we have a tool to basically provide a safety net if the sample size is small, effectively. But that is a standardized bid algorithm, and that pretty much most of the market will be using that on.
Most DSPs.
Most DSPs will be using this model, and they'll have their own slight iterations, but it's pretty much that. Right? What we thought would be really cool is if we could we could not change this bid algorithm, but add a modifier, and we call that modifier a CBA. So it's the customized bid algorithm for the client, and that CBA is going to be completely different client by client, and it's going to be based on the analysis that makes an impact for that client. So let's go back to the example of, let's say if we built a lookalike segment of 100,000 users who've got similar interests, yeah. But the model that we've placed on that means a user might have to have, there might be some stringent rules that the user has to have at least 15 characteristics the same as a user in here, and they have to have done that within the last month. Hence why the number's quite small. But however, if you just loosened up that model a little bit, you could probably grow this to maybe 1 million users. Obviously, the relevancy there is lower. So what we would do with a CBA is, with all these million users, is we would put an individual score by each user based on the model that we've used to create this lookalike segment. And a user, say, that's had 50 iterations the same within the last day, we might have a modifier of him of 200%. But let's say one user who's done one iteration 2 weeks ago, we might modify that bit by 0.0001.
So it's kind of that match rate with the recency and the frequency and so forth around how often they're matching these different attributes and so forth. And
yeah.
Okay.
But then this bid algorithm then would be applied to all line items on the campaign, not just the customized lookalike segment. So if a user is not within this portfolio, this would be 0. But if they are,
Right.
we want to capture that user because there's a higher chance of them converting. But where that would be unique by client is each client would have their own statistical model. So for example, a gambling client, time of day is probably one of those 240 variables that's more important than geo. So we put a higher score to users with the same characteristics.
And you're doing your own kind of modelling to understand which ones are trying to find not just correlating factors, but things that actually causal influence.
Yeah, absolutely, and each client's different. Yeah, so you might have a travel client where actually the domains that they visit is more important than some. So you put a higher score to users which have similar domain behaviour.
And the insights you're capturing, that's a telling insight that you've just kind of said there for travel. How do you, and I presume you're giving this back to planning teams to try and use beyond just the kind of display execution?
Yeah. So, I mean, for us, it's very important that, yes, you give us £10,000 and we can hit your goals, but we've actually learned a hell of a lot by trading our clients' budgets. So we kick that insight back, everything back to clients. Like, a client has to sign off on this CBA before we can even implement it. So they really have to understand the model we put behind that. But that data is so valuable for clients, They could use that way further up the funnel. Like, we're at the execution stage. They could use that much more in their comms planning stage.
As a percentage it's different by client, but how much of a budget as a percentage do you think is now going on these types of customised bidding algorithms?
Well, the customised bidding algorithm will play a part in every single impression that you buy on, right? Because it's doing that. But in terms of these, like customised lookalike segment targeting, that's probably one of 15 to 20 strategies we put in a campaign. What we are noticing though with this is that it works. So hence why we are.
Not your business is prospecting as well. Right?
Yeah, and one of the key things I would advise people in the industry is that when people talk about customised lookalike targeting, it's a bit of a buzzword, but you've really got to make sure you understand exactly how a prospective set of customers is being defined, yeah? Because if you build a segment here of prospects,
the seed, I think.
Yeah, the seeds based on your modelling or something like that. However, when a vendor is running the campaign, they're actually targeting everyone in this section. They're effectively retargeting as prospecting, and it's really important you ask that the market asks the question, if you are doing lookalike modelling on our existing audience base, exactly how are you doing it and how are you executing it? Because otherwise you get into a situation where this, which does happen, it's just going to be a barrier to innovation.
Just transparency end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I think that's been really useful.
Cool. Yeah,
thanks for coming
for the opportunity.
in. And so, thanks for tuning in this week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Great.